My name is Nancy, and I'm here to offer you both a story of hope and some very concrete ideas that might be helpful to you. If, one, you have someone that you love who's gotten sick with a mental illness and you've had mental health emergencies and you've had to call for help. Two, if you are officers responding to those calls for help or crisis people responding to those calls for help. And three, if you've ever encountered a skunk. So I want to pass along to you what I've learned, and I'm going to begin it by telling you a story about my older son, Ezra, who had an encounter with a skunk. From that story, there was so much that I learned that I could apply to our own family's experiences with our other son, who has gotten sick with a very serious mental illness. Um, the story that I dub, May the Skunk Whisper Be With You. I've spoken about it at a couple of National Alliance of Mental Illness workshops that I've participated in as a parent, particularly speaking to two young groups of cadets at the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. Turns out lots of people have had encounters with skunks, so it gave us a great common ground to talk from. So what happened in that story that I learned that was meaningful and that I can pass on to you that gives you both help and some concrete ideas? I'm going to do my best to say them to you now and also let you know that what I'm basically telling you is also on the National NAMI blog site for this week's blog post. Anyway, here goes. May the skunk whisper be with you. So, if you've had to call for help with a loved one with a mental health emergency, first off, so absolutely critically important, still not well understood, is there is a huge difference between offensive behaviors and defensive behaviors. With somebody who is sick with a mental illness, even though on the outside their behaviors may be nasty sounding, nasty physically, they come from a defensive point of view. They are trying to protect themselves from some real or perceived danger they feel. Could be their thoughts, their delusions, their anxiety. For them, they are feeling threatened and they're trying to protect themselves and defend themselves. Offensive behavior, on the other hand, and there are many research studies on this that you could look up yourself, offensive behaviors are generally motivated by a more predatory instinct where somebody's after a goal or a thing that they want to get from somebody else. So if you are the one responding to a mental health crisis, or if as a family member you're trying to understand what's going on with your loved one, where they're acting in ways that are out of bounds and that scare you and scare them, please remember that offensive and defensive behaviors, again, I repeat myself, look the same on the outside but require very different responses in order to be helpful. Just imagine yourself at a time in your life when you felt scared. If you feel scared or frightened or something's going to hurt you, if someone comes up in your face and is overly strong with you and directive with you, is that going to be helpful? No. On the other hand, if you were in a predatory state and somebody was coming in to help, yes, they would have to confine you, control you, etc. Two different paths. Essentially important that those who are asked to deal with mental health emergencies at family homes, in particular, get the training that they need. It's happening more, but not enough. Crisis intervention training is one of the main modules, and first aid mental health emergency, I believe it's called, is another model of how you approach people when they are having a mental health medical emergency. Again, I will emphasize things. This is a medical emergency when someone is having a mental health meltdown. It is not a criminal emergency. They do not require punishment. It's a medical emergency. They need and require care. So how do you help them get to it? And what did I learn from this skunk whisperer story? Well, let me tell you about that because it's really kind of a cool story. So my older son, I have only two boys. My youngest son is the one who got stricken with a mental illness freshman year of college. his brother, just 2 years older than he, um, was off at college when he got sick, and we're an extremely close family. His brother came home, quit college, and said, I can't be away while he's this sick. I need to try to pitch in and help. So many years later, this is many, many years later, we're now 22 years down the road with this. My oldest son had this encounter with a skunk, and this is how it went. He and his wife and our two grandsons live in the country. They homeschool their boys. They are kind hearted, loving, giving people. They are trying to build sustainability in the world. They care about everybody around them. On this morning, Christina, my son's wife, was driving him to work. They have only one vehicle, so they have to juggle. Daylight, it was daylight, but it was in the country. And walking across the road in front of them as they rounded a hill was a skunk with a glass jar over its entire head. Now, this was pure daylight. And my son Ezra said to his wife, Christina, stop the car. I want to try to help him. And Christina sort of gulped, like, what? It's a skunk. And Ezra said, I want to try to help him. And he got out of the car and he walked over to that skunk. And he said to him very quietly with an outstretched hand, I'm here to help. Don't worry. I know you're in trouble. Let me try to help you. And he quietly and repetitively repeated those words. And the first time he told me, I was stunned. He said, the skunk walked over to him. Can you believe that? So the first thing he attempted to do was to pull the jar off the skunk's head. No luck with that one. So the skunk was back on the ground, and he said, I repeated quietly and calmly, no worries. I'm here to help you. We'll figure this out. And the skunk came back. This time, like stunned, he picked the skunk up by the head with a jar in its head and tried to shake him so the jar fell off. Well, the end result was not what he planned on. Both the skunk and the jar fell on the ground. The skunk scuttled backwards a few feet, and so did Ezra. They were both a little sort of nervous. Skunk started to raise his tail. We'll call that his protective weaponry, because he was feeling scared and helpless, as people do when they're having mental health emergencies. But he never sprayed Ezra. And Ezra again, slowly, repetitively, calmly said, it's okay. We can figure this out. I'm here to help you. Trust was established. The skunk came back to Ezra again. So then he yelled to my daughter-in-law, fantastic daughter-in-law, best in the world, who was in the truck, Christina, bring me a hammer. So she brought the hammer, and Ezra gently and carefully went around that skunk's whole neck and hammered that jar off. The skunk went on his way. Ezra went on his way. So what is there to take away from here that is so applicable to helping people who are experiencing a mental health medical emergency? Be patient. Take the time to establish trust. Let them know you're there to help. Use encouraging, calm words repetitively. And, officers today, their jobs are not what they necessarily signed on for. Whenever I've spoken to a group of cadets, I ask them, how long since you wanted to be a police officer? Have you had police officers in your family? And there are always lots of yeses to those questions. But what we ask them to do today is much more involved, much more complicated, because our world is more complicated. But in the end, in some ways, you've just got to go back to what the simple truths are. If someone's in trouble, particularly if you're well informed it's a mental health medical emergency you're responding to, then you just have to be there and tell them you care, you can help, and stick it out with them. I do want to add that for families who I spent years educating myself. I'm a very self-reliant girl, got very involved, and have done a lot of proactive work around mental health advocacy. If you do need to call for help with a mental health emergency, please, when you call, if you have a local mental health crisis response center, call them first. If you don't have them, call, and you have to call the police department. Be sure to tell them this is a mental health medical emergency. Ask them to come with no sirens and no lights. That's overstimulation for somebody whose head is already so full they cannot focus on anything. You are worsening the situation. You need them to come in quietly, no sirens, no lights. My husband and I have a routine where when we've had to call, we leave the house, we call from a place close by, we inform the mobile crisis, the officers, whoever may be coming, that we'll meet them at the end of our driveway, and together we walk up to provide support for our son to help address this mental health medical emergency. People are changing and understanding. There's so many things for us to understand about conditions we judged before. You know, everything was judged. There was a time cancer was judged as a shameful secret. Mental health, mental illness is not a shameful secret. It's something that happens in some people's lives, and it is devastating. Its impact can be lifelong or it can be shorter. And any of you who respond or listen or involved with someone can make a difference. Don't ever forget that. Give yourself a break if you need it, if you're a family member. But do remember that you have influence and that your loved one is suffering and that you can help make a difference. Thank you to everybody who participates in trying to help those who are sick and are in the midst of a mental health medical crisis. Thanks. Peace. Goodwill. Pass it along. Good night.